After a protracted romance, Theresa Caputo, a medium from Long Island, was finally getting married. The guests were present, the decor was exquisite, and Theresa was beaming broadly as she rejoiced. Everything was ideal. However, an unforeseen circumstance arises out of nowhere. "Theresa is still my legal wife," exclaims Larry Caputo, Theresa's ex-husband, who arrives out of nowhere. When they heard this incredibly abrupt comment, every attendee glanced up in amazement. The wedding hall briefly erupted in a covert enthusiasm as Theresa's eyes displayed a hint of surprise. At that moment, the police showed up. All of the marriage documents were examined. "Larry, your claim is completely false. This marriage is completely legal," the police declared after a few dramatic moments. Theresa knew that love had won again when she saw the grin return to her eyes and the guests clap and sigh in relief. The wedding hall glittered under soft golden lights, flowers of every hue decorated the tables, and the air smelled faintly of fresh roses mixed with vanilla candles. Theresa had always been a woman of profound intuition, a gift that allowed her to connect with the unseen, comfort the grieving, and bring clarity where confusion lingered. However, despite her extraordinary abilities, love had always been a delicate, unpredictable force in her life. Theresa stood at the entrance, radiant in a gown that seemed to capture the soft glow of the room itself, her hands clasped nervously as she prepared to walk down the aisle. The room was filled with the soft strains of the string quartet. The sunlight streaming in through the large windows caught in the glass chandeliers, which created little sparks of magic. Michael's face, full of anticipation and admiration, shone as he waited. Friends, family, and even a few clients of Theresa's medium work had gathered, eager to witness this moment of joy. Theresa inhaled deeply and began walking down the aisle, feeling the spirit of love and joy all around her. However, as she was about to approach Michael, a sharp voice broke the exquisite harmony of the moment. "My legal wife, Theresa, is still with me." The shout came from none other than Theresa's ex-husband, Larry Caputo, who was standing at the edge of the corridor with a look of despair and rage on his face. Heads turned immediately as gasps filled the room. Time appeared to stop. Theresa's eyes widened, and for a brief moment the joy in her face faded to shock. A nervous murmur echoed through the guests, some clutching their programs, others whispering anxious questions to their neighbors, and Michael's hand tightening around Theresa's as he moved closer, a silent anchor in the chaos. "She's mine! Legally, she's still my wife!" Larry stepped forward, his voice shaking with emotion and louder this time. Even in the midst of the shock, Theresa's training as a medium allowed her mind to focus. She could feel the energy of fear, the tension of injustice, and most importantly, the unwavering support of love surrounding her. The wedding hall, which had been meticulously designed to radiate serenity and celebration, now throbbed with tension. Cameras flashed, some guests reached for their phones, and whispers turned to uneasy chatter. Before anybody could respond further, police officers who had been surreptitiously summoned by a worried visitor entered the hallway and calmly assessed the situation while holding paperwork. One officer kindly but firmly addressed Larry, saying, "Sir, please step aside while we verify the claims." Theresa, standing erect in her gown, felt a surge of fear, but also a peaceful sense of hope that truth would prevail as the police studied the marriage certificates, divorce papers, and court records, drowning out Larry's loud complaints. As the officers whispered among themselves, Larry's face showed amazement and despair as the minutes seemed to drag on forever. Eventually, the chief officer glanced up and said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Mr. Caputo, your assertion is wholly untrue. The prior marriage was formally dissolved, and this wedding is legally recognized and fully valid. There is no obstacle to this marriage occurring." Theresa felt her shoulders relax, her lips curl into a victorious smile, and Michael gave her a gentle embrace while whispering words of love and assurance. A collective exhale swept through the hall, and the tension was replaced by relief, joy, and renewed energy. Guests burst into applause, with some even crying with happiness. Theresa's voice, steady and clear, carried her vows through the hall, and every word resonated with authenticity, faith, and the certainty that love, true love, cannot be undermined by lies or fear. Larry, now silent and defeated, was politely escorted out, his abrupt disruption having failed to overshadow the love and commitment that Theresa and Michael shared. Theresa was overcome with gratitude as the couple exchanged rings and shared their first kiss as husband and wife. She had experienced fear, surprise, and uncertainty. But now she was surrounded by love, family, and the unmistakable energy of those who had helped her along the way. Michael whispered to her as they danced, "Nothing, no obstacle, no claim, no fear could ever keep us apart." Later, during the reception, Theresa moved among her guests, laughing and sharing moments of happiness, and the near crisis had faded into a story that would be remembered for years, not for the disruption itself, but for the triumph of truth, love, and commitment. And Theresa knew that love had won out when she smiled and looked into the eyes of the guy who had always been her heart. But a small brass bell chimed overhead, and the smell of dust, old vinyl, and nostalgia wafted out like a warm, familiar memory as Theresa Caputo pushed open the glass door of Dave's Vinyl Vault, the storied old record store nestled between a deli and a barber shop in a quiet corner of Long Beach, which she hadn't visited in years. She had just stopped by since the store was shutting permanently next week, after over 50 years, so this wasn't supposed to be a reading day. But Theresa froze when the bell rung. She had to clutch the countertop as a flood of spirit energy surged through her chest. She steadied herself and whispered, Okay, who's here?" Megan, Dave's daughter, was standing behind the counter, packing up records with her black hair pulled back in an untidy bun. Her expression brightened up when she saw Theresa, then softened into something tender. "Oh, Theresa, it's been a long time. Dad would have been so happy to see you here." "Sweetheart, he's here," Theresa said with a smile and a palm over her heart. Megan took a deep breath. "You mean right now?" Slowly, Theresa nodded. "As soon as I entered. I miss him so much. This store was his life," Megan said, setting down the records and leaning on the counter with trembling hands as the air thickened. Theresa inhaled deeply. She had no intention of reading, but spirit had its own timetable. "Your dad is virtually shouting into my ear, so let me tell you how I'm feeling," she said quietly. Through her tears, Megan chuckled and said, "That sounds like him." "He's showing me these shelves, and he keeps pointing to the back room." "What's back there?" Theresa said as she moved farther into the store and ran her fingertips over rows of vintage recordings, including Fleetwood Mac, the Beatles, and the Beach Boys. "His office and his little workshop. He repaired vinyl players for customers," Megan said, blinking. "Yes, that's it. He's saying you haven't gone in there since he passed," Theresa said, her eyes fluttering. "No, I can't. It still smells like him, and I'm not ready," Megan said, stiffening. "He wants you to go. Not today, but soon. He says there's something he left for you there. Something handwritten," Theresa said in a softer voice. A warm, pulsating energy suddenly filled the room, and Theresa's head tilted as though someone were whispering right into her ear. Theresa remarked, "He's singing." "Singing?" Megan's head snapped up. "Something old, really old. He says he used to sing it to you when you were little," Theresa said, frowning as she listened. "Oh my God. Stand By Me. Ben E. King. That was our song," Megan said, covering her lips. "He says he sang it off-key," Theresa said, and nodding. "Yes, horribly off-key. He sounded like a broken jukebox," Megan said with a moist giggle. Then Theresa jerked as she saw another picture. "Is something going on here? He's showing me a fire? No, smoke. A little fire? He saved the entire store. He never let me forget it." "There was a small electrical fire in the workshop years ago," Megan choked. "He's saying you saved him that day," Theresa said, shaking her head. "What? No, I didn't even know until it was over," Megan said, blinking quickly. "Oh, but you did. He claims that he realized he had something worth living for, and that you were the reason he persevered through all of life's challenges when he looked out and saw you standing in the doorway, crying." Tears splattered down Megan's clothes as she sat on an old stool, her knees buckling. Theresa approached a dusty shelf where Dave stored rare albums, and she touched the very best of Otis Redding, a faded blue LP. She gasped at once. "He's showing me that day, Megan. Your dad never told you the truth about this record." "Oh my God." "What truth?" Megan scowled. Theresa cradled the album as if it were a sacred object. "He saved this for a special occasion, your wedding day, and bought it for you, not for the store." Megan gasped and said, "But I'm not married." He's saying she will be, and when she is, play the first tune. It's the soundtrack of her new beginning. Theresa said, "I know," Megan sobbed while covering her face with both hands. Spirit wasn't done yet, so Theresa let the silence settle for a while. Theresa turned slowly as the fluorescent lights flickered overhead and a blast of chilly air blasted through the store, even though the door was closed. "Oh, he wants to discuss your brother." "Kyle, my brother?" Megan froze. "He says you're fighting." "Something about the store?" Theresa asked, nodding. "Kyle wants to sell everything. Fast. He never cared about this place." Megan swallowed. As was typically the case when Spirit communicated through Theresa, her voice grew deeper. "Tell her she's right, but tell her not to fight with her brother. The store is not worth your relationship," he says. With tears running down her cheeks, Megan shook her head and said, "But Dad loved this place." "He wants you to let it go, saying that all the memories are already in your heart, even though he knows you love it too," Theresa remarked. Theresa's eyes then strayed to a corner of the store where a stack of neglected 45S was sitting next to an outdated record player that was partially broken. She whispered, "He wants to play something." The player clicked suddenly and it whirred, and then the room crackled softly. It had not been touched. The dusty air carried the opening notes of "Stand By Me." "Dad, oh my God," Megan exclaimed as she collapsed to her knees. "That's your dad, sweetie. He's showing you he's here, and that he's still singing your song, probably terribly," Theresa said, grinning through her own tears. Megan smiled and sobbed at the same time. Theresa closed her eyes as the energy shifted once more, this time becoming softer like a warm hand on the shoulder. "Now that he's saying goodbye, he wants you to keep one thing in mind." Megan's face was smeared with tears when she looked up. Theresa whispered as she opened her eyes, "Music never ends. It simply changes tracks," he explains. "And even when she isn't able to hear me, I will be on every track of her life." The song ended. The lights became steady. With the exception of the enduring warmth of a father's love, the store felt empty once more. "Thank you. I don't know how you do this, but thank you," Megan said as she gently rose up and held Theresa's hands. "I don't do it, they do," Theresa said with a smile. She moved to the exit, and as she opened the door, the bell sounded softly. Theresa took one last glance over the shop before leaving. "Your dad would probably say that this was his last encore." Megan shook her head and said, "Yeah, and it was perfect." Theresa left behind a record store full of music, memories, and a love that would never, ever fade as she stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. But for months, Angie Marino had been dreaming of a man in a navy jacket, sometimes smiling, sometimes standing far away near the shore, always silent, and she had no idea who he was or why he came to see her nearly every night. Angie Marino had always been a woman who lived halfway between the everyday world and a place of constant wonder. Her dreams were vivid, too vivid, soaked in colors and feelings that didn't make sense when she woke up. When she finally made the decision to get treatment, she was worn out, had not slept well for weeks, and every morning she woke up with tears drying on her cheeks. At last, her friend Marlene whispered the words Angie had been terrified to hear. "Angie, perhaps you ought to speak with Theresa Caputo. If anyone can explain why those dreams persist, it's her." Before her nightmares started to feel like messages, Angie wasn't a believer. So one clear October morning, she entered a little cafe in Hicksville where Theresa had promised to meet her for an impromptu reading. Theresa arrived precisely as everyone had predicted, with her long nails tapping on her iced latte cup, her straight hair blown out like a golden halo, and her distinct energy that brightened the room simply by being there. "Angie?" Theresa inquired, smiling warmly as she walked over. With a trembling voice, Angie answered, "Yes, thank you for meeting me." "Let's talk, darling. Sit down." As soon as they were comfortable, Theresa lay her drink down on the table, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath, as though she was listening to something only she could hear. "All right," Theresa whispered quietly. "I need to know who the man in the blue or navy jacket is before you even tell me anything." "That's exactly who's in my dreams," Angie said, freezing. "He's been trying to reach you for a while. He comes in dreams because that's when your guard is down. Spirit loves using dreams. They don't scare us as much. Now, this is a younger man, maybe early 30s, handsome, strong jawline," Theresa said, nodding as if she already knew. "That's him," Angie muttered, "but I don't recognize him." "You wouldn't. You never got to meet him," Theresa said, leaning in closer and speaking softly. Angie felt a chill run down her back. With her hands tightly gripped on her lap, she questioned, "Why is he coming to me?" "Sweetheart, this is someone connected to your life, but not through you directly. I keep hearing the name Daniel or Danny. Does that make sense to you?" Theresa said, her gaze softening with a hint of sorrow. "Danny was my mother's first fiancé. He passed away before I was born. My mom hardly talks about him," Angie said, her eyes widening. "Well, he's talking now," Theresa said with a sympathetic smile. Angie felt the gentle hum of the cafe suddenly recede, the air thickening around her, as though the walls were listening. With a cracked voice, Angie said once more, "Why would he come to me? Because he was watching over you long before you existed. He knew about you. He knew your mom's life after he passed away. And he wants to help you with something right now," Theresa said, touching Angie's hand. Angie swallowed hard, trying to help her. "What is he trying to tell me?" "He's showing me water, a shore, a long stretch of beach. You're standing there too. Have you been dreaming of the ocean?" Theresa said as her eyelids fluttered and she inhaled slowly. "Every night, he stands by the ocean. It's almost always sunset," Angie remarked, almost in a whisper. Theresa responded softly, "That's because he passed in the ocean. He drowned while attempting to save someone else. He never found closure, but he wants to talk about you and not the tragedy." "Me? But why?" "Because you're standing at a crossroads, Angie. Spirit is telling me you're afraid of making a big decision," Theresa said, giving her a startlingly strong look. Angie's breath caught. She had been tormented for weeks about a job offer she had received in California, which was across the nation and would require her to leave her mother alone in New York. She hadn't shared it with anybody, not even Marlene. "How did you—" "Spirit always knows. Danny says you've been feeling guilty, like moving on with your life means abandoning your mom. But he wants you to know that she survived far worse than distance and she'll be okay," Theresa said with a knowing smile. Now, tears were streaming down Angie's face. "He also shows me writing a notebook. Have you been journaling your dreams?" Theresa went on, her voice warm but firm. "Yes, each and every one." Theresa nodded and said, "Good, because he has been using them to communicate. He was a dreamer too, and he wants you to live boldly, something he never had the opportunity to do." They were still for a minute, and then the sounds of the cafe gradually came back, as if the world was gradually getting back into motion. "Theresa, is he angry with my mother for moving on?" "Oh God, no. He's proud of her. He says she carried enough grief for a lifetime. He's happy she loved again, and he loves you like the daughter he never had," Theresa said with a swift shake of her head. At that moment, Theresa gave Angie a shoulder squeeze while she sobbed silently into her hands. "It's all right," she whispered. "Spirit only appears in dreams to those who are capable of receiving their messages. He chose you because your heart is open." "Will the dreams stop now?" Angie inquired after a moment in a shaky voice. "Not stop, but they'll change. He won't look dejected or aloof anymore. The ocean may still be there, but he'll feel lighter." "Dreams change when the message is delivered," Theresa said with a smile. Angie nodded, taking in each word as if it were important. Theresa grabbed her iced latte and rose up, saying, "Before I leave, sweetheart," a tiny seashell, white, weathered, and wonderfully shaped, was placed on the table by her. "Keep it. Whenever you're unsure, hold it and breathe. He'll show you the right path. He showed me this. He said it was from the last beach he ever visited." Angie felt a sensation that was almost electric as she cradled the shell like a prize. She said, "Thank you, Theresa." "Thanks Spirit instead of me. I'm just the messenger," Theresa winked. With that apparent assurance, she left the cafe, leaving Angie sitting there with an odd mixture of hope and sadness in her heart. Angie had another dream that night. She was standing on the same beach at sunset, but this time the man in the navy jacket was grinning. Genuinely grinning, his eyes calm and warm, and the waves behind him were glowing gold. But Theresa Caputo, whose blonde hair was tucked behind her ear as the wind attempted to undo it, stepped out of her car that afternoon as gray clouds hung low over Hicksville. Melissa Turner, a 35-year-old nurse, had sent a trembling voice note asking her to a private reading, and Melissa's one comment stuck in Theresa's head from the moment she heard it. Theresa felt a strong thrill run up her back as she ascended the small stone path to Melissa's house, one of those telltale indicators she was all too familiar with. Spirit was close. Before Theresa could knock, Melissa answered the door, her eyes red-rimmed, frightened, and exhausted. "Thank you for coming, Theresa," she muttered. "Honey, your brother, he's been talking my ear off since I parked the car, so don't thank me yet," Theresa said, giving her a tender hug. Melissa gasped as she ushered Theresa into a cozy living room that was lined with framed photographs of her with a young man, usually about 28, broad-shouldered and dressed in a U.S. firefighter's uniform. "Is your brother a firefighter?" Theresa said, her fingers twitching. "Yes, his name was Daniel. He died saving a family during a warehouse fire," Melissa said, looking shocked. Theresa raised her hand before Melissa could say anything more, saying, "Sweetheart, he's right behind you." Melissa froze. "He's showing me his lungs. Burning," Theresa added quietly, "and I can feel he passed from smoke inhalation. He's saying he didn't feel pain at the end. He said it was fast." Melissa started crying right away. "I always wondered if he suffered," she said. "No," he's shaking his head no. He says, "Liz, you have to stop torturing yourself. He wants you to stop playing the news tape." Melissa, who had only been referred to as Liz by Daniel, covered her mouth. The environment changed, and Theresa experienced a protecting force and a surge of warmth that felt almost like an unwelcome hug. Theresa remarked softly, "Melissa, your brother was very strong and still is. He told me that you two had a wonderful bond, almost like twins." "Everything I am is because of him," Melissa said, nodding. "He raised me. Our parents passed away when I was 16. Daniel was 21. He worked 2 jobs and took care of me. He was my hero," she sobbed. "And he still is," Theresa said, putting her palm over Melissa's. Theresa abruptly jerked, as though someone had prodded her. "He's laughing," she remarked. "He's showing me a memory, something about roller skating. You fell and sobbed, and he carried you all the way home." "Yes, I fell so hard I thought my knee was broken. He gave me piggyback rides even though he was exhausted from work," Melissa said, laughing and crying. "He says, 'Tell her I'd carry her again if I could,'" Theresa grinned. Melissa wiped away her tears, yet the room filled with emotion. Another vision came into Theresa's thoughts, and she took a deep breath. "Did he play the guitar he's showing me? He used to sing me to sleep when I had nightmares. His guitar is still in my closet. I can't bring myself to touch it," Melissa said, her eyes widening. "He says the music will help you heal, so he wants you to take it out," Theresa explained. The place felt almost sacred as a long moment went by. Then, all of a sudden, Theresa sensed a change, a stronger, more pressing force. Theresa muttered, "He's bringing up that day, the day he passed." Melissa tensed up. "He's demonstrating to me that, despite being told to stop, he returned to the burning building saying, 'I had to do it. There was a kid. A little boy was trapped. Daniel got him out, but Daniel didn't make it,'" Melissa wailed. "Your brother wants you to stop blaming yourself," Theresa said, nodding. Melissa snapped her head up, asking, "Am I being blamed for anything?" "He says you had a bad feeling, like a premonition, and you told him not to go in that morning. I begged him, I said, 'Stay home today, Dan. Something feels wrong.' He laughed and said, 'I'll be fine, Liz. I always am.' I feel like if I insisted harder, if I screamed or cried more, maybe," Melissa murmured, covering her face with trembling hands. "No, no, sweetheart. He is yelling, 'No!' He's saying, 'My fate was mine. You couldn't have changed it. He wants you free of that burden,'" Theresa said, leaning forward and speaking in a forceful but loving tone. Melissa sobbed till her shoulders shook. Theresa sensed another message coming after a lengthy pause, one that was brilliant, delicate, and loving. Theresa remarked, "He's talking about a letter he wrote to you." Suddenly, Melissa exclaimed, I never found one. He wrote it the night before he passed away, while he was thinking about you, and he says it's in a blue envelope under your bed." Melissa jerked to her feet and said, "Under my bed? Are you sure?" "Go look, Liz," he adds, grinning. However, feeling overwhelmed, Melissa gently sat down again and said, "I'll take care of you when you leave." I can't believe this," Theresa nodded. "He's showing me what's in the letter. He wrote, 'You deserve a beautiful life. If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll keep living.'" Melissa sobbed uncontrollably once more and collapsed into her hands. Even Theresa had to take a deep breath since the atmosphere was so filled with emotion. Then she sensed Daniel's parting message, warm, compassionate, and proud. He takes your hand and says, "Liz, you are my hero too. You saved me long before I ever saved anyone," Theresa added quietly. Melissa broke entirely, trembling with both love and pain. When you hear that little flicker of a tune, that's him humming. When the lights flicker, that's him teasing you. When you feel something brush by your shoulder, that's him hugging you, Theresa said, squeezing her hand. He wants you to know that he never left you. He walks with you every day. I've felt those things. I thought I was going crazy, Melissa said, wiping her eyes. No, honey, that's Daniel. He's very proud of you. As the force gradually subsided, the surrounding air warmed, indicating the spirit's tranquil departure. Now he's backing off. He's saluting you. He wants you to live, not survive. Live, Theresa said. Melissa nodded as the tears fell quietly but steadily, and perhaps for the first time since the fire, a sense of calmness started to descend. Thank you, Theresa. You brought my brother home, Melissa said as Theresa got up to go. No, sweetheart. He was already home. You just needed to hear him, Theresa said, placing her hand over Melissa's heart. Theresa felt Daniel's energy dissipate into a little breeze as she stepped outside into the crisp evening air, as though he was whispering one more time. Greetings, lovely viewers, and welcome to my channel. My name is Mina. I hope you are having a great day. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the video.